Good morning, everyone. I'll call the meeting to order. And Amy, a roll call. Attendance.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Members present today include Michael Burns, Violet Delkey, Chuck Hendrickson, Zach Hiring, Pat Kovash, John Rogala, Jeff Schauman, and Bobby Solene.
Would you like to introduce your assistant sitting with you?
Yes, absolutely. This is Betty. And Betty, can you tell them your last name?
Hartley.
Welcome. All right. Any agenda amendments?
Yeah,
Derek.
Mr. Chair, we're going to add, as most of you may have seen this weekend, there was an article in the forum regarding the Holiday Mall TIF. City Manager Chris Volkers and City Attorney John Shockley are going to address that issue as item number 6. So right after the Commissioner's report, we'll add the Holiday Mall TIF there.
Thank you. Is there a motion to approve the minutes from last meeting?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Motion approved. Any citizens care to address the board? Thank you. Moving to the next item, Commissioners' reports. Pat?
Just a quick report from the NBA. We just finished off our golf tournament. We had a record amount of teams. I think we had 19 teams. You could have water skied down the fairways. It was really wet out, and very nice in the meadows to let us take carts out on there. So well attended, great event. Sherry did a great job. The only bad part about the whole day was my golf game. So, and our NBA Moorhead Proud Oohs and Ahs, our 4th of July, we're still seeking donations for that. We're also looking for volunteers to help pick up the stands afterwards for parking. So if anybody has time and is going to be around there, you get a great view, and you can be part of our 4th of July celebration. The food trucks are going to start at 6 p.m. and the live music at 8. So if anybody can volunteer, we'd sure appreciate it. It generally takes we have 15 to 30 volunteers, because we have to secure the perimeter and stuff. So it'd be great to get your help there. The Bridge Bash is welcoming back all college students. It'll be held on September 5th on the Main Avenue Bridge, and we're partnering with the Downtown Community Partnership in Fargo. It's going to have local food trucks, live entertainment, games, photo booth, and many businesses will be displaying on the bridge. It's going to be from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. So another really neat event to kind of show all the college kids that are here what this town is made of, and hopefully they like it and want to stay here. So Sherry also, she has our membership is up to 216 full-time members, and she just signed 2 more today, so she's really working hard. We've got a growing business community and one that really wants to work together and try and move Moorhead forward. So
Great. Thank you. Any other commissioners' reports? Okay. Moving to the next item, a Holiday Mall TIF. I'll turn it over to Chris.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. EDA Board, I know it's a little awkward. Do you want me to come down there?
Yeah.
No? Yeah? Okay. Hold on. You all received my email this weekend, yesterday, responding from the city's perspective on the column, or the article, or the column in the paper on Sunday, I believe. I wanted to go over that, so we have it on, for the viewers, so they can see what I said and what the city stance is on it. I'll leave it to John to answer questions, and so I'd like to do that with the intent that this seemed to be directed, that complaint seemed to be directed not only at EDA, and I'm not quite sure why you guys actually weren't, especially this EDA, involved in this, but also at our city attorney, who is simply he's simply responding to our requests and acting on our behalf and protecting the city. So the complaints by by these members or by these folks should not be directed at the city attorney. They really should be directed at the city. So as such, I think I'll go over a summary of what I sent you in the email, and then we'll open it up for questions, okay? So this is about Rick Jordal, and as a developer, he developed the Holiday Mall area over where the Marriott is right now. He was our developer at the time, and this goes back, to early 2000s, I think, a long time. As a result of that development and the incentives offered that developer and what the city did on behalf of contributing to that development, that was developed through the years 2000. In 2009, December 22nd, 2009, the city entered into a settlement agreement with Mr. Rick Jordal. That settlement agreement allowed for a yearly payout to be continued, and he is receiving that now. It released any and all claims to the city and from the city in regards to this development. Mr. Jordal received an extra $1,125,000 as part of that settlement agreement. Staff did object, and this is an important point because I was not here at the time, of course, but I have checked a lot. There's a lot of history about this, and city staff, and the city attorney can confirm this, strongly objected to entering into that settlement agreement because they were afraid something like this would happen, this wouldn't be the end of it. That wouldn't have been the end of it. But regardless, the city did enter into the settlement agreement. All parties did sign that. You have that in front of you today, and the public is glad. We're glad to offer a copy to the public or media. Oh, we have it. We're going to hand them out right now, if anybody requests that. In the settlement agreement, you will see an exhibit attached that shows that Mr. Jordal would never fully be paid for the, I think it was a TIF part of the project. And so that is attached and part of the settlement agreement that you will have in front of you that he signed. I did misspeak in my email where I said the city condemned 2 homes. It was 2 properties, actually, which is even worse. They were active businesses. One was the what is it?
It was the ANDA property.
ANDA property.
For those of you longtime Moorhead residents, it was the building on stilts down there. It had a 1-story and you could park underneath it. That was about $500,000 that this board paid for it. So any allegation that you guys didn't contribute to the TIF, it's just patently false. This board took $480,000 out of its reserves to pay for that property, plus all the litigation fees that were incurred. That went up to the Minnesota Supreme Court and back down. We had a 2-week trial in it. It was quite an extensive undertaking. There was also a property, a hair salon, that was an active business that was condemned as part of it. I think that was about $130,000 of principal, plus some legal fees. And that was back in the days when you could use eminent domain for economic development purposes. So the city actually condemned, or the EDA condemned, with the city condemned these 2 active businesses that had businesses in them. They were active, condemned them, and then transferred the property to the developer. And so that was always been heartburn from my standpoint that we were doing that, but we can't do that anymore under Minnesota law because the legislature changed that. But that was done, and now that was actively paid out by this board.
So fast forward, you've got the settlement agreement with all those terms as noted. Thank you, John. We did offer, when we did sit down with Mr. Jordal, we did really hope to come to some, to give him something. We didn't know what, but as it turns out, there was nothing else to give. We've given all we can. The settlement agreement, the legal agreement is binding at this point. However, what we did end up doing, I did ask the city attorney to draft that paragraph. It's paragraph number 2 in the letter, the response, which offers the redeeming of some bonds. And in return, We would like to discuss with this developer the fact that they own that property that's formerly Family Fare, and there's been a lot of interest in that property, and we would like to encourage them to have some discussions about that property for development. If we were going to go to the legal expense and effort to redeem those bonds, so Mr. Jordan would get a little bit of savings from that, we would ask that in return he work with us on speaking to potential developers about the property that is just sitting there at this point. So that was all we thought, or we legally can do, and then we thought we made that extra effort by offering the redemption of the bonds. But besides that, I don't think I missed anything in summary. We'll open it up to questions and try to help and answer anything that you have.
Thank you, Chris. Any questions?
If I might, City Manager Volker, if you can, since we just received the settlement agreement, can you just touch on maybe the premise of why the city agreed to something, and was it, as the article indicated, was it to live up to obligations, or was it something additional offered by the city? If you can provide some clarity in that regard.
So I'm going to let the city attorney do that, if that's okay, because I wasn't here then, so, John.
So I will give you my understanding of the transaction, a little bit of history. I was the attorney who was responsible for condemning the ANDA property and all the litigation involved in this. And then at the time, we were wrapping up, you'll see referenced in the agreement, the ANDA case. And so this came about in 2009. There were allegations by city staff at the time that the developer had failed to live up to his obligations under the development agreement. And there was also allegations by the developer, same as today, that somehow the city had not been following through on the payment to the pay-as-you-go notes. The structure of the TIF out there is a waterfall of funds. And so, like any TIF district, the more development you create, the more funds you get out of it. What goes to be paid first, so think of it as a first, second, and third mortgage on your house. What gets paid first are the bonds that were issued by the EDA. Those have first priority. So there's two series of bonds that get paid. Whatever's left, water flows out to the pay-as-you-go notes. As with any TIF project that is instituted by any developer, and I'm not really aware of any other ones out throughout the state, pay-as-you-go notes are paid out the last. And so it is an incentive to the developer to put as much development in, because the only payment you get out of the TIF comes through the pay-as-you-go notes, which are based upon the increased taxes. And so as a result of creating a TIF district out there, all of the tax dollars on the increased increment don't go to the school district, they don't go to the county, they don't go to the city, they go into the TIF to repay the bonds and then the pay-as-you-go notes. So there was allegations on both sides regarding compliance with the Development Assistance Agreement. Development Assistance Agreement was drafted in the early 2000s before the project took off. It was drafted by outside counsel. It's quite an extensive agreement. It's about 100-some pages long. And there was a decision made, and I was not part of the final decision, but there was a decision made at the time that there wanted to be a resolution of the issue to sort of buy peace, so that the city and the EDA, everybody involved, would not have to hear about this anymore and just get it resolved. So the settlement agreement that's attached to the back of my letter just is the same settlement agreement that you'll often hear referred to as, and I'll just touch on a couple brief sections. It would be the second page of it, which is paragraph number 2. Under the settlement agreement, the city agreed to pay $1.125 million to the developer. That was on the pay-as-you-go notes. So we refunded the 2 bond issues that were ahead of the pay-as-you-go notes, got some additional funds, and paid out $1.125 million on the pay-as-you-go notes. The total principal amount of the pay-as-you-go notes are about $2.5 million. So what we're really talking about is compounding interest over time, because the pay-as-you-go notes, there's just not enough increment to pay as the pay-as-you-go notes, so the interest just compounds, so you're paying interest on top of interest. Then the second exhibit, or third paragraph references the exhibit that City Manager Volker's reference that's attached to the end of the agreement. That's just the projected cash flow analysis. And I think what's critical to outside observers on that is it's talking about the refunder, but you'll see column L, which is payments to developer. It has the 1.25 million. You'll see that there's never really an opportunity for those pay-as-you-go notes because the interest continues to compound year after year because you're paying interest on top of interest. That's all you're paying is interest. You're not really getting to the principal. And so there was an acknowledgement that those notes would probably never be paid in full. And that, and moving into the next part of the agreement would have been paragraph 5, which I'm just covering the high-level issues. The paragraph 5 was the ongoing ANDA case. At that time, there was unresolved law in Minnesota regarding whether or not when you condemn contaminated property, what's the value of the property? And there also was a companion case in which we were bringing suit against the prior owner of the property for contamination that that may have been caused by that property. At the time, nobody knew how that case was going to go, so if there was a decision made by the city council that if additional funds came in from that case, that would go into there and be used as part of the redevelopment. So what ultimately happened with that case is the Supreme Court decided that it wanted to create a new precedent that hadn't been established throughout the United States, remanded it back to the trial court. We ultimately ended up settling it, paying what we had originally appraised for the property, which is that $480,000 that came directly out of EDA reserves that was not charged to the TIF district. Because when we looked at it, we'd entered into the settlement agreement, so there was no way to pull additional funds out of the TIF district. And so that was a direct payment out of EDA reserves for that property, which had been condemned and transferred into the TIF district. And then what's probably most important is under number 7, the developer, by executing the agreement, dropped all claims and assertions that the city or the EDA have not properly followed the agreement or the pay-as-you-go notes, and also agreed that the city and EDA in the future will not be in violation of the assistance agreement and the pay-as-you-go notes if they're made as set out in this agreement. And then number 8 was the waiver by the city and the EDA that of any claims that the developer breached the agreement. And so that was signed both by Moorhead Holiday Associates and the Trust Family Trust. You may ask, well, why, when we met last, I said that the letter was going to go out as soon as possible by the end on Friday. We met on May 5th. I prepared the letter and I sent it to city staff to review. I did not get to go ahead to send the letter until later on, and that's why the May 30th date. So I was, as Chris said, I was following directions given to me as a city attorney, and so the letter was done. It was just awaiting approvals because this is a very complex project. It touches a lot of different departments, and there's a tremendous amount of history involved in it. That said, we're still willing to, as Chris said, we extended the offer that we'll look at refunding those 2 bond issues if we can get some additional development on the west side of 8th Street. I'll also reiterate, when we've met with the developer, we have said over and over, we're willing to work with you because the more you develop within your TIF district, the more revenue you generate. It's a really basic premise of any TIF district. Put more buildings up, more vertical construction, you get more tax increment. And we've even extended that if it would require changes in zoning laws or setback distances, we'll engage in that. Derek has been, supportive of the whole process. We have not heard anything back about new proposed developments on either side. And so I was personally a little frustrated by the whole article in that it portrayed the EDA and the city as not following through on our obligations, which could not be farther from the truth. We've clearly followed through on our obligations. We're trying to work with the developer about additional options, about future development, and refunding the other bonds. And I don't, from my perspective, I was never contacted by any reporters to actually ask what the background of the story was. And I think that's probably true for the city manager also.
That's true.
Any other questions? Thank you, John. Hearing none. Chris?
Nope, thank you.
Thank you for that update. Moving on, it's the 2019 legislative session, final update. Lisa? Good afternoon.
So I believe I was at your last meeting and the session was still underway, and we kind of went over where we were at, but everything is over now. The session ended on May 20th, and there was a special session to enact the bills that were negotiated in the final days of session on May 24th and 25th. They are now adjourned to February 11th of 2020, so it's all over. The governor has signed the bills, so we're in good shape there. The report includes the priorities that were established by the Moorhead City Council last fall. And you'll note that there were 3 projects in the bonding priorities: the Clay County Transfer Station, flood mitigation, and the 11th Street grade separation. Unfortunately, the governor and the legislative leadership did not reach agreement on the terms of a bonding bill, and therefore there was no action taken on these requests. The typical cycle for the legislature is that the even years are a bonding year, and so we have optimism that there will be action on the requests that we have in play next year, and but time will tell. You know, we just never know the outcome. But there was strong support by the leadership of both the House and the Senate for our project. So it's not based on the merits of the project. So we feel pretty good about that and our chances moving forward. And I know this is a professional report. I wish I could have put some emojis in it because we're really excited about the results of the Border Cities programs that we were able to, with the assistance of Representative Paul Marquardt and, you know, the entire legislature, but especially Paul, were able to achieve a sustainable appropriation for the border cities. The Border Cities program has been in place for 36 years. And while there have been appropriations over time, 11 times, there's sometimes been between 2 and 5 years between appropriations, and there's been times for Moorhead or for some of the other cities where the funds have been completely depleted, and which hurts the programs that we have, like our workers' compensation program, where we have, you know, an expectation for existing businesses. So the sustainability aspect of it was really what our goal was, to achieve that this year, and we were able to accomplish that. So there is now in the state's base budget an allocation of $750,000 for the border cities, of which Moorhead's current share is 70% based on per capita population. So Moorhead will receive $525,000 per year at the present time. So we're really, really excited about that, and look at ways of, you know, we'll examine our programs now too to see if that suggests, or if there's opportunity for any adjustments or program changes. One of the things we suggested to the other border cities is that now that we have this, we get together and talk about our programs, because there's flexibility within the law, and some cities do things a little bit differently than we do, and it would be a good opportunity, I think, to learn from one another. So that's something that we plan to do later this summer. There was also a technical amendment to clarify ineligible businesses and possible changes in the development zone language to allow greater flexibility. And those changes were largely recommended by Amy, because she's our administrator of the program and knows the ins and outs of the program, and that technical language was included in the final bill that was passed. So we're excited about that. The other priority that we had is additional local discretion on building codes between Minnesota and North Dakota. There were bills introduced on that, but there were no hearings on that activity. So now that we have this sustainable appropriation, you know, we'll have additional discussions with the city manager, and as we prepare for the 2020 session. And maybe that's something that can take a higher profile now that we have this issue taken care of. So overall, I would say it's as good as it could be for the situation that we were, that we were dealing with without a bonding bill. So with that, I'll leave the report with you. I noted, just as I was on my way down here, that while we updated the report and included our briefing sheets, I had not updated the date, so I apologize for that. But this is it's got the end of session dates on it, so that's the last one. So I'll make that correction before it goes out any further. So, does anyone have any questions?
Derek?
I'm just going to say thank you to Lisa and to Scott, especially our legislators, so Senator Eakin, Representative Lean, and Representative Marquardt. I know I appreciate the emojis comment, because that is a really, really big deal that we have sustained appropriations for Border City. I can't tell you how many times I've met with developers that have discussed that. Well, what's going to happen in 5 years? Is that program still going to be around, or is the money going to be available, and am I going to have to take that liability on? And that's a really difficult question to answer to a developer or somebody that's interested in your community, that we just don't know. We don't know if it was going to be there, and that liability can sometimes be pretty significant. But now to honestly say we have money there, it's available, it's coming, it's going to be a big difference maker when we're having conversations with developers, as well as existing businesses too.
Yeah, exciting news, thank you. Chuck, did you have a question?
Well, Derek kind of stole my thunder, but
What was
yeah,
that?
he stole my thunder. And it's great work. I mean, it's it's a positive move, and we're going to probably get more development out of it. And it was just good work by our legislators and Chris and who am I forgetting? Scott. Yeah. So just good work, really good work. I wish they would have had a bonding bill, but you can't wish for everything. So
Michael.
thanks.
Lisa, thank you so much for all the hard work you put into that.
My pleasure. It's been a learning experience for me, and it's interesting, and it's something that is of great value to the city. So I appreciate the opportunity to do so.
Thank you.
Pat?
I think it's really important too, and I think the challenge for this group is to make sure that we carry that message out. You can't believe how many business owners I talk to, and I go, well, if you move to Moorhead, we can give you a 20% reimbursement on your workman's comp or property tax incentives. And I think that needs to be our job. How do we figure to get the message out so that people understand what's being offered to them and the advantage of coming here? Because it makes a big difference on your bottom line.
Thank you. Thank you, Lisa. Number 8, the Border City Enterprise Zone. Amy, Derek?
Yeah, I'm going to let Amy kind of take this one first. You'll see an attachment in your packet, and then I'll kind of tag team it on the back end there. So go ahead, Amy.
All right, thank you. So for the enterprise zone, first of all, thanks again, Lisa, for all of the work that you've done. And honestly, I can't, a sustained appropriation is just an amazing accomplishment. And so thank you very much for that. And with that, that doesn't actually start and come into our what I would consider our account or budget until 2020. And so what we need to do is take a look at the 2019 program and basically just continue. I'm just asking for a continuation of what we've done in the past years for the workers' compensation rebate program. So we would like to consider keeping that credit amount at 20% of workers' compensation expense with a $25,000 program cap for this year. And as Lisa somewhat alluded to, maybe we would have an opportunity to take a look at either enhancing that program or bringing on different programs in the future. But just for today and for this year, I recommend that we keep it at the same level.
Yeah,
Does
and
anybody?
I'll just follow up with that, Amy. So I think she did a great job summarizing. She did a great job putting together this report. And I know we've had conversations in the past with the EDA and others about, amending different policies, especially with our enterprise zone or our border cities policies. I think the hard part that we looked at was until we knew if we were getting sustained appropriation or not, it was hard to create a new program or to allocate funding somewhere else if we didn't know it was going to be there. Obviously, we do know that now. We can really start working with our businesses, our partners with the MBA and Sherry, the EDC who's here as well, and figure out what our needs truly are. I think that's going to have a lot of conversation with this EDA board, also through our downtown master plan, et cetera. Those are policy recommendations maybe we can work towards for 2020, but as Amy stated, we definitely want to keep the program available and alive for 2019, and that's what we'd be asking for today is your support in keeping that program for workers' comp available for 2019.
Thank you. So is there a motion to sustain or to keep the?
So moved.
Thank you. Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor of the motion say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. Thank you. All right, moving on. Derek, you can introduce the proposed information for the business retention and expansion software.
Yeah, we've had some conversations in the past with this group, but our partners, thank you for Ryan and to Sammy for being here with the Greater Fargo Moorhead EDC. We have been talking a lot about our regional approach with some software for when we're conducting interviews and surveys with our primary sector, as well as other businesses in the community. There's a regional approach. I'll let Ryan and Sammy get into it, and then I'll discuss our own local justification for it. Just so you know, we're moving forward with a grant through the West Central Initiative, a community planning grant, which I'll get into it a little bit afterwards. But for now, I want to introduce again Ryan and Sammy with the Greater Fargo Moorhead EDC, and they can kind of walk through this handout that they provided. Thank you.
Thanks, Derek, and thanks to the EDA for letting us have a few moments to talk to you about what we've been working on for the last few months. I know there's been communication that this project's in development and is forthcoming, so we're getting close. We actually sent out, we're doing some tests now, sending automated emails to our contacts, our primary sector companies, to make sure that we're actually getting through their spam filters and that this tool can be implemented and used effectively. So it's kind of a really multi-layered approach. I would call it 3 layers. So, one of the first layers comes to us from our current president and CEO, Joe Rasa, who joined us the second half of last year. So he spent a number of years with a company called Blaine Canada developing and refining these BRE, business retention and expansion tools, a survey tool. So they came up with a set of 19 questions that really are able to get at the heart of data that helps indicate trends of healthy economies, primary sector companies, where they're challenged, and certain triggers for action where the EDC and or community partners at Moorhead, West Fargo, and Fargo can intervene with those companies to try to head off and be proactive in addressing primary sector company needs. So that's kind of really the first layer, and so we're fortunate to have that background that he's bringing and those years of development of that tool set. On top of that, we build that set of survey questions into our CRM program, which is Salesforce. And so we've been using that and going out and doing one-on-one BRE visits. They usually last between 45 minutes to an hour and a half. So Derek and I think we've done one of those together. One of them I did without you. Sometimes these things come together pretty last minute. You're trying to schedule them, and by the time they're scheduled, schedules don't always line up. So this tool will help us do some of that, obviously online, and instead of having to engage with 400 primary sector companies across Clay and Cass County. It gives us insight into which companies actually have some issues have some growth, may have some retraction that needs to be addressed. So we've got some triggers set in there for, are you rolling out new products? Are there positions that you're currently having a real challenge filling? Things that might be stumbling blocks to growth and might be hindering growth that we can get in there and address and make sure that we're not losing an opportunity where someone starts to look somewhere else to meet the needs of their company's growth or issues they're having. And then on top of that, the phase we're in now is building out this community partners portal. So the three partners being West Fargo, Fargo, and Moorhead, and having Derek, for example, with access to a portal where he can access all of Moorhead companies' information. He can see kind of history of our interaction with those companies. We can see any interaction that he's entering in there with those companies. And then we can work on what we're calling tickets, where if there's an issue, it might be an electrical rate issue or a snow removal issue or something more complex like an expansion issue, and there's some incentives that we need to kind of sharpen our pencil and make sure we're providing, like the workers' compensation credit and getting those to the right decision makers. We I think often assume that everybody knows about the programs and incentives out there at the state level and the local level, and I think that's often not the case. You have new companies and you have companies that have been around for a while, and they really don't keep up on that, and so that's where we come in and we're able to help them take advantage of programs that are out there. So that's all kind of real time. I can send Derek a ticket, that we're having an issue with. It might be a permitting issue, it might be a zoning issue or a snow removal issue, and he can either reassign that or he can activate it in real time and vice versa. So it's going to help us work a lot more collaboratively, streamline our interactions, and give Moorhead insight into some of the work we're doing and companies that have timely issues and needs, and even just to go back and look at kind of the history of projects and work we've done with the company, so you can see when we've last done a BRE visit to them, for example. And then also within that process, I just slipped my tongue, but maybe Sammy can talk real quick about kind of some of the pricing and how we're looking at some of the technical aspects of this.
Sure. The pricing, as you can kind of see in the handout here, the pricing will kind of be split between the EDC and then each of the partner communities. So first year costs, as you can kind of anticipate, we would have some development costs included there, that total being $64.33. But then our ongoing costs are much lower for each city partner, mainly paying for some upgrade costs that we need to run the platform, some survey license costs, and then community partner license costs as well, running under $3,000 each year beyond that. One thing I wanted to mention is that the tool that we're using is incredibly robust. And so if Derek has some needs that go beyond primary sector, we can look at expanding some additional either apps or solutions or things if there's some additional development costs that arise, then we can talk about those too and talk about different solutions that we can implement.
So that was what I forgot. I was going to mention the build out. So while we're using this tool from the EDC standpoint as primary sector, because that's the focus of our and mission of our organization, there's certainly an opportunity to build upon that from a community standpoint, to use it for, retail or service any of the industries and companies and frankly could be nonprofit organizations within your community that you want to keep track of and have a system in a database, which has kind of the robust functions that Sammy mentioned. And the whole thing is branded, to your community as well. So it's a Moorhead branded community portal. So when you go to use it, it will look and feel like your own tool, but plug into all the database of information that we've frankly accumulated and developed over a number of years.
So do you want to add any more to this?
Yeah, I'll add just a little bit. So thank you to Ryan and Sammy and Joe for their work on this. I think it's it's a great tool for us to utilize in the future. I think just conversations between Amy and I when I was first kind of coming on board, and we were talking about the establishment of our own BRE program, which we still need that from not only just a primary sector industry, but for the rest of our businesses in town. That software alone was going to cost significant dollars just to, whether the EDA or the city, wherever that would have been funded. We feel like this is a great way to, tap into a regional source. We can share information easily. I love the idea of the ticketing solutions. I mean, we see it all the time, and even just, for example, that how we're working on it right now, and I'll call out Sherry, but Sherry's out talking to a number of different businesses, same with myself, but a lot of times we're just emailing back and forth of like, hey, did you hear about this? Or did you know this company's having this issue? And I gave them your card, or vice versa, and we're able to tackle it. Now, this is a more formalized approach where we can get to the right people, whether it's Public Works or Christie in planning or a city manager issue, et cetera. And we can accomplish it right away before some business makes a knee-jerk reaction to something they didn't realize that was out there for them or assistance was available for them. So I feel that building this out locally is going to be a big asset to us moving forward. We are, as I mentioned, seeking a local community planning grant through West Central Initiative. It's a $7,500 grant. Thanks to Amy and Matt, and who's interning with us right now, I was able to kind of draft the application. It's a 2-to-1 grant, so $2 from West Central to the one that the city puts in. We feel that obviously will cover a good cost for this first year, and then we'll look for the future with an EDA budget, maybe amendment or something like that to incorporate the cost of the software. But it's a very useful tool, an effective tool. And we're excited that we can partner with the EDC on trying to make this work for all parties. So with that, we would be seeking support for the grant application. I think it's something that we should certainly take advantage of if the money's there. West Central has told us that it's a priority that they would like to help us with. So we have their support. It's just a matter of getting that application in, and we'd be happy to answer any questions that the EDA may have.
So just a question maybe for Ryan. You mentioned snow removal as an example of generating a ticket. So is there then integration into the city layers of operations, or is this just at Derek's level, for example?
Yes, there could and would be integration into that level. I mean, that would be something we would have to customize with each community, so that would be part of our continued build out. But kind of phase one would be getting it functional and working, which how close would you say we are to that?
I would say weeks.
Yeah.
We're in our final stages of testing, and you know how that can go sometimes. But yeah, we're doing some very thorough testing, and I would say we hope to be doing some training in weeks.
Yeah, so ideally, we would be able to send a ticket to Derek, and he could reassign it to city staff or other partners as he saw fit, or we could do it directly if we develop enough of a rhythm where we're kind of understanding what the expectation is. But that would really be kind of a real customized approach, because different community partners are probably going to have different approaches to doing that kind of work.
Yeah, and how I would view it is, we have department head meetings with these ELT meetings that the city manager hosts. So whether it's being able to build out at some point in time, having those ELT department head managers on the kind of the ticketing software as a user, let's just say, and then we can get the information right to those folks. Otherwise, maybe it's the city manager, myself, or assistant city manager Dan Molly, and then we're able to allocate from there, just distribute of, this is the issue we have. Maybe it's a private issue that we can't really do much with, but we can at least have a phone conversation or something like that we can try to rectify the situation.
Is there, is there an accountability element within the program so that you can verify that whatever issue there was a ticket set up for, that it has been addressed?
Yeah, so there's, when the ticket's created, it's a new ticket, and then it kind of gets worked into some different stages of, whether it's Ryan or Derek working the ticket. The great part about the system is that you can get sent like a weekly report of your tickets and their statuses. And then also just continue working on those tickets. We can also set up different alerts. So if, Ryan hasn't, maybe has some activity on a high priority ticket for a week, we can build an alert. So that would make sure that Ryan kept informed of what that ticket was, how that was working out.
Okay, thank you. So we need a motion to support the grant application and moving forward with this.
Yep, and I'll just say to Mr. Chair that, so we're looking obviously for support of the application for the grant. Obviously, we'll report back if we've received that funding. And then the intent is, as we're building things out, we get more hard kind of costs of what that will look like for us in the future. We'll certainly be coming back to the EDA of how we want to sustain this through maybe a budget amendment or something like that. So, but really, it's just it's a support of this grant application.
Are those of us on West Central going to vote on that then, in one of our meetings, on that grant?
I'm not exactly sure how West Central
I think
does
there's
that
something
community
different.
grant. Yeah, I don't know if
Okay.
it's through if their boards make up. I'm not sure how they approve those community planning grants, but I'm sure they have some process, yeah.
I think ours is more the gap financing.
Oh, yeah, you're maybe thinking of our Moorhead Loan Fund,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
this would be
Part of,
this would be an organization through, because it's not coming from any Moorhead dollars, this would be coming directly from West Central.
okay.
Yep, so it'd be through their board, I'm assuming.
I'll move to approve.
I'll second.
Thank you. Any further discussion?
Mike,
Yes.
just to clarify, Derek, you're not asking for any funding approval at this point, just approval to pursue the application?
Correct, yes.
Any further questions? Hearing none. All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So Derek, you still have the floor.
Yeah, I do. And thank you for that. I mean, that is a tool that'll be very, very effective for us moving forward. We're looking forward to continuing to build that out. And, we've talked about this BRE kind of set up for quite a while now. It's a time-consuming process, right? You got to have the scheduling, you got to be able to work through it, get out to as many businesses as we can. So I really view it as a partnership, whether it's through Downtown Moorhead Inc., who I'm out talking to a lot of downtown businesses in general, or if it's the city, an EDA member having a conversation with somebody and saying, hey, like I met with a business who's really struggling with a zoning issue. Well, that's a contact us. We can create a ticket and we can get on it right away. So it's really a collaborative effort, which I'm really excited to kind of go through that process.
If I could just add
yeah,
one
go
thing
ahead.
as well. This data-driven decision-making approach is really going to provide us with data that's going to offer some visualizations that we should be able to find very helpful as far as, rather than just piecemeal picking out what we think issues are or what people are wondering about or, what we want to set our priorities. That's what I'm looking forward to more than anything is the collection of all this data in one place and some of the mapping and tools that we'll be able to draw out of it.
Yep.
Yeah, and if I could, I think the approach is great, and it's fantastic that the initiative is looking at accepting our application. I think the important thing will be integration as it hits the city level, not just the EDA level.
Yes.
And so when we talk about $11,000 for development of a community portal, that number might be something much, much larger at some juncture to make it a functional tool that the city planner or city engineer can jump on and say, hey, I have a resident or business that's upset because we're not moving their snow by open a business, for example. So, right step, I would just, when we're asked for money, what's the city's plans to further that development program?
Absolutely. With that, I'll kind of go through a couple of the highlights of the monthly report here. We had the downtown master plan is signed. That contract is signed. We've had a couple presentations with the EDA, or with the MBA, sorry, and some others on that. We're getting we're working on branding right now, so kind of getting the certain color formation, website, incorporations of logos, et cetera, and kind of getting a very thought through, identifiable plan strategy. As well as we'll have a large kickoff meeting here in a couple weeks with our community partners, including some city department heads. Obviously, there's a lot of data and a lot of information that we need to get to our consultants. So we're getting the right people in the room to have these conversations. The center, and stop me if you have questions throughout any of these, please. The Center Avenue project, we touched on it a little bit at our last meeting, but as most of you were probably aware, the city council rejected the one bid that we had for Center Avenue. The MPS project, the utility project, is what you see going on right now. But obviously the road project will not happen this year. We're obviously in conversations with our 4th Street lot developer, Epic Group, as well as some others, as far as the timing of that future project, the impacts of it, whether we go up for a mill and overlay or a full reconstruct based on some of the cost analysis. So the hope is that we'll have some more information later this month, but a lot of decisions have to be made, and we're certainly taking consideration of the businesses that are along Center Avenue and around Center Avenue, because there's certain impacts of the project that's happening right now, but also the timing of that future project as well. So a lot more to come on that one. Yeah, Jim?
So from what you said, there is not going to be a completion of that project this year. And if you could explain some rationale, because if it isn't done, then there's going to be additional costs associated with the Moorhead Public Service project because of the overlay issues.
Yeah, and I'll defer maybe to Chris or Dan on that particular aspect, but I think with the one bid that came in significantly higher than expected for the road project, not the utility project, that was something that the city council and staff just couldn't proceed with, just from the funding standpoint. I don't think there's any way to start that this year, even if it was rebid or anything like that. So I don't know if Chris, Dan, Chris? Go ahead.
Mr. Chair, Commissioner Regala. We've spoken to MPS, to Bill Schwant. Our engineering department has done that. And you're right, there is a little extra cost as far as, completion by MPS and the city doing the overlay. So MPS has said, no, there won't be an additional charge to the city, and then the city will take on the additional charge of doing that extra paving. So I think we've worked it all out. So we're good. Everybody's good with it. And the increased cost was from the $2 million estimated to $3 million estimated. That's why we weren't able to fund it this year.
There's not enough time to rebid it.
That's correct. Yes, that's correct.
So they won't be doing any striping or any different traffic configurations, or are
We
they
will.
gonna do that?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up. That was one last thing I was going to do. I think that'll be coming forward to the next council. There's been a strong push for at least doing something temporary in the short term. So there was a strong push to remove the signal at 7th Street. That was from the engineering department. So I think that is moving forward to remove that signal, as well as some striping that will convert it to that kind of 3-way system. I don't think we'll be able to incorporate like all the elements, including some of the on-street parking, maybe in some areas, but engineering team is working through that, and I think the expectation is there will be a striping project still this year, so we can kind of get people in the habit of this is what it will function like in the future.
I think it's a good idea, because if for some reason something doesn't work and then we go in with the construction, we'll have a better idea of and have better control of, or whether we need to do the 4th alignment or whatever. I think
Yep.
that would be a good idea.
Yeah, and absolutely. I mean, it's disappointing. I'll just say from a downtown Moorhead Inc. standpoint, obviously, that to consolidate and have it under one construction season would have been the most ideal for our businesses downtown. But Obviously, circumstances that come up with just one bid and being significantly higher than that is something that we have to be considerate of the costs and what that means for the city standpoint. So I'll just say that we're working with the businesses. We want to make sure that it's the least impactful. We'll be having conversations with them, so nobody will be caught off guard if when decisions are made for the future of the timing of that project and the cost of that project too.
How much longer will the Moorhead Public Service construction last where it's still a construction zone for access?
I'm trying to off memory, but I believe it was, I thought it was July.
Yep.
Yeah, and because the idea with it being done by July, then the city could have gone and finished their project, finished out during the construction year was the hope for it.
So residents, when they're accessing those downtown businesses, can assume that it won't be these narrow lanes with cones for the balance of till next year. That come mid-July, weather permitting, that would be restriped and accessible. Okay.
And that goes for the bridge as well. I think around the similar timing of when the completion of the MPS project, the bridge will be opening about the same time. I will note though that that was part of the timing thing that we were talking about as well is we were working with our partners to the west in the city of Fargo, and that as the bridge was reopening for MP Center, that's when you were going to see some significant closures for the Main Avenue Bridge. So we were trying to kind of overlay as best we could those projects, but we will see a much more open stretch on now MP Center. So, yep. Yep, go ahead.
Just further clarification, I think is important that the utility staff and the city staff, and especially in the engineering, are working very hard to collaborate their efforts to do both jobs at the same time for cost benefits here, but again, the distractions and the traffic issues that are created by that. So I think it's Bob and Travis and the GOZI are working very closely together to try to ensure that this is diminished as much as possible.
Moving on, just a few things. I mentioned the last meeting we had, City Manager Chris Volkers and myself had the opportunity to visit the city of Frisco, Texas. It was a wonderful visit. Some key takeaways from that was they really worked on strategic partnerships, removed barriers to entry from a bureaucracy standpoint from businesses, and really kind of focused on building for the youth. And I thought that was a tremendous takeaway that we can hopefully show by example as we kind of are building out our future with the city. I'll kind of move ahead on a couple different things. Feel free to stop me and ask questions if you have anything on the report. But kind of going back to something that Member Kovash had mentioned about trying to get the word out on some of these incentives or some of these opportunities that we have. I don't think that shouldn't be understated. We need to do a better job of getting out to our businesses, our developers, et cetera, of what we have available to us. I think Sherry has done a great job of again, continuing to build a membership base for the MBA, but with that, we need to, I think, have a serious conversation of how we promote and maybe advertise some of the great things we have, because I think I can say this without, kind of embarrassing one of my board members, but, Eventide came in with a permitting project just about a month and a half ago. And Amy Thorpe and myself were able to catch it and say, we think you may qualify for a tax incentive. And we had the phone call with John Rewer, and fast forward a few weeks later, we were able to accommodate an incentive that not only was a good investment, I think, from the city standpoint, but it helped their business model as well. So that's somebody who's on our board, was an active EDA member for a long time, that just, as policies are changing, as different things are happening, those can go, fall through the cracks. So we just need to continue to get out, promote our story, tell the true story of what we have. And I'll just mention one focus that I'm doing is getting out to our banking partners. So on May 20th, I met with Cornerstone Bank. I'm meeting with Bell Bank this week with their commercial, our business banking team, their leadership. A lot of times a company or an individual go directly to the bank or directly to the planning department or just submit a building permit, but how do we get them on the front end if they're not, maybe necessarily reaching out to us? And we can't always get to everybody. So letting them know about our tools, letting them know if they have somebody coming in, I'm your contact or Amy's your contact, reach out to us and we can try to get you some information. Actually, right before this meeting, I had an individual call me. They were talking to Cornerstone Bank and they recommended calling me. So we were talking about a property in Moorhead before they start. They're looking to acquire a property and we're able to talk through some different tools that may be available for them. So we just need to continue to spread that. So whether that's through the EDA or others, it's a partnership. We really got to work together on that one. A couple big things with the EDC, and I'll just kind of mention with Ryan and Sammy here, but there was a forum hosted on May 21st. Our mayor was able to give a few opening remarks on opportunity zones. You may recall that the opportunity zones are a federal program. It's a federal capital gain tax deferment for individuals that are looking to invest into an opportunity zone fund or projects within an opportunity zone district or area. As a reminder, we have a substantial opportunity zone area within pretty much our entire downtown, and it follows a census tract that was approved by the state level. We're starting to get more traction with opportunity zones in general. Amy and I and Matt are working on dedicating a portion of the city's webpage to really promote what an opportunity zone is, where opportunity zone is. So we're excited to kind of continue to roll that out. There's also a press conference regarding a kind of a new initiative called Fueling Our Future. Some of you may have heard that. So I would just say stay tuned to that. I know there was a presentation to City Council last week. That's a push to raise about $5 million from the public and private side, about $1 million from the private sector to kind of really tackle some community issues. And that's a partnership between the chamber and the EDC. Lastly, well, I'll just say thank you again to Sherry Larson. She did a great job with the golf tournament. Just continue to do it. One note you'll see events mailing list. What I'd really like to have this EDA group consider is Sherry does a wonderful job of on a weekly kind of standpoint. There's business breakfasts at 7 a.m. on Wednesday, the 4th Wednesday of every month. There's a lunch. There's 560 Connects. These are great ways for myself and others to get engaged and to hear from different businesses. Instead of kind of replicating or trying to duplicate efforts, I would hope that we can maybe try to work together to get maybe the EDA members on the email list from Sherry. So I know we've been working on it to get the city council, the mayor and city council to have their emails on there. But things happen pretty quickly, so we just want to make sure you get the right information. If there's things that make sense or presenters that would be a good fit or that you want to hear about, getting you direct access to those events, I think would be a really great idea. So if you're open to that idea, just let me know, and maybe Amy and I can work on sending out an email. And if you're interested, you can just say a yay or nay, and we'll try to get you on that email list for the MBA. But great opportunity to get more people involved. The food truck update. Some members, and I've been hearing from some different food truck vendors who have a food truck and let's just say Fargo and want to do some different events or basically set up shop here in Moorhead. I was able to kind of dig into this a little bit. It's administrated through the county. Right now, kind of a little bit of backstory is if a Fargo food truck would like to come in and let's just say set up at Junkyard or set up at a different site, right now they are using a special events permit through the county. That special events permit has a regulation and restriction from the state that they can do that 10 times. They can have 10 different dates that they can use for that special events permit. The state doesn't have any leeway to expand on that. If a food truck wants to go more than 10 times or wants to set up in a more permanent location, they would have to meet the standards of the environmental codes or the building food truck standards from the state of Minnesota, which again has a little bit higher code requirements than what you would see in the state of North Dakota. So we've been kind of working through that. We've been working with some of the food truck owners. I think they're aware of that stance now. I think there was some confusion with that. We'll still continue to work with the county to see if we can get some more flexibility on it. But right now it looks like it's at the state level from the reciprocity issues between the building code requirements. So just wanted to give an update on that because I know some people have asked that in the past. And again, you'll notice on the information and update, there's a couple upcoming hearings for tax incentives. You all receive an email with this, but I just wanted to, Amy and I thought it'd be a good idea just to include this into the packet. But you'll have on June 10th the basically approval of the enterprise zone tax credits. And then on the 24th, you'll have property tax hearings for the Gavilon Fertilizer and Thrive Behavioral Network. And again, for some of the new members, we have those are pretty standard baselines. There's certain thresholds that they have to meet. There's no really reviewable criteria. They either meet it or they don't with some of these assessment levels. And we'll be bringing those forward to the City Council. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions. It's a busy month. An exciting month. There's a lot of good things happening, but still a lot of work to be done as well.
Thank you, Derek. Any comments, questions, insights? Yeah, Chuck.
Before I forget, I just want to thank Attorney Shockley and Manager Volkers with dealing with the Holiday TIF district. It's been 10 years of hard work, so I want to thank him. I also appreciate your willingness to work with the developer still, so thank you very much. That's all I have.
Okay, thank you. With that, the meeting's adjourned.
Thank you.
All done.
I don't get it on a weekly basis. Sometimes I get it.